Okay, let's dive right into a uniquely frustrating feeling so many of you face. You know the drill. You're reading intricate English articles perfectly, understanding all the subtle nuances in complex podcasts, catching the jokes. But the absolute second you try to actually open your mouth and speak, your mind just goes completely blank. Today, we're unpacking some fascinating insights on exactly why this happens, and more importantly, how you can permanently bridge that gap in this explainer.
So I really want you to ask yourself honestly, have you ever been watching a movie without subtitles, right? You're totally following along with the plot and the rapid-fire dialogue, but then out of nowhere, someone asks you a simple, everyday question like, hey, what did you do yesterday? And you just freeze. The words literally vanish. The conversation just awkwardly stalls out. Well, if you've ever experienced this sudden mental block, the research we're looking at today is going to be an absolute game changer for sure.
It's exactly what experts call the silent understanding problem. You know the vocabulary, you understand the question, but you simply cannot speak the words. The biggest takeaway here is that understanding a language and actually speaking it, they are two entirely separate neurological skills. It's the classic difference between receptive skills, taking that information in, and productive skills, which is generating it yourself. So please hear me on this. You are not bad at English, and you're definitely not alone. Your brain just hasn't fully connected those two pathways yet.
Section 1. Diagnosing the disconnect. 7 hidden habits blocking your spoken English. Let's break down exactly why this happens.
It turns out, one of the absolute biggest roadblocks is treating language like a spectator sport. Think about going to the gym, right? Sitting on a bench and watching someone else lift weights for an hour isn't going to build your muscles, no matter how closely you study their form. It's the exact same here. Merely listening to English builds your passive recognition skills, but to actually get comfortable speaking, you have to physically lift the conversational weights yourself. You literally have to train your mouth to make the sounds, not just your ears to hear them.
Then, oh boy, there's the translation trap. It is this agonizingly slow mental lag. You start in your native language, you translate it, you pause to run a quick grammar check in your head like some outdated computer processing a huge file, and then, finally, you produce the English. Honestly, by the time you finish this entire mental gymnastics routine, the conversation has already moved on without you. To speak smoothly, you have to start training your brain to think directly in simple English, completely bypassing this rigid 4-step process. Now, let's talk about the fear of making mistakes and how it completely paralyzes us. Operating under the goal of, I must speak perfectly, is basically taking a vow of silence. It keeps you quiet because you're terrified of a tiny grammar slip or a poor accent. But when you shift that mindset to just, I need to be understood, it's incredibly empowering. It is exactly like a child learning to walk. You simply cannot become fluent without allowing yourself to stumble and fall a little bit along the way.
So here is a rather surprising takeaway. Knowing thousands of individual words is basically useless if you can't connect them in real time. Instead of memorizing single, isolated vocabulary words, the trick is to memorize ready-made building blocks. These act as the connective tissue of a real conversation. Dropping in phrases like, give me a second, or let me think, or that makes sense, buys your brain crucial processing time to figure out what to say next, and it sounds completely natural to whoever's listening.
There is also a massive trap in overstudying grammar. Now, don't get me wrong, grammar is undeniably important, but it's meant to help you communicate, not act as a giant roadblock. If you memorize rules from a textbook without actively applying them, you're just building walls in your mind. The real key here is to take a rule, say the past tense, and immediately put it to use by turning it into a short, automatic story about your daily life. Things like, I woke up, I had breakfast, I drove to work.
Of course, a simple lack of speaking practice is incredibly common, usually because people feel they need a dedicated partner, like a native speaker, to talk to. But surprisingly, you really don't. One of the most effective ways to train your brain to produce language on the fly is just narrating your life out loud to yourself. Seriously, just say, I'm making coffee right now, or the weather is really beautiful today. It might feel kind of silly at first, walking around your kitchen, talking to the walls, but it absolutely works to build real-time fluency. And finally, there's the trap of trying to sound exactly like a native speaker. So many learners hide their voices because they are highly self-conscious about their accent. But listen, an accent is just a story of who you are and where you've been. Letting go of that impossible standard and aiming purely for clear, effective communication takes an enormous amount of pressure off. If the other person understands the point you're trying to make, guess what? You are succeeding.
Section 2. The 20-minute solution. A daily routine to bridge the gap. Now that we've diagnosed the symptoms, let's look at the cure. So, how do we actually fix this? Well, the research points to a highly actionable, manageable 20-minute daily commitment broken down into 4 equal, bite-sized tasks, 5 minutes each. By dedicating just 25% of your routine to these specific, targeted skills, you systematically build your fluency without getting overwhelmed by some crazy hours-long study session. It is all about consistency over intensity.
One of the most fascinating techniques in his routine is called shadowing. It is simply the act of listening to a short sentence, hitting pause, and perfectly echoing the speaker. You copy the rhythm, you copy the pauses, and you copy the pronunciation. It's essentially physical therapy for your facial muscles. It gets your mouth physically used to the unique mechanics and flow of the language before you even have to think about what to say.
So bringing it all together, your daily game plan looks like this. First, spend 5 minutes listening to a video just for the overall meaning. Do not stress over every single word. Second, shadow those sentences for 5 minutes to train that muscle memory. Third, spend 5 minutes speaking out loud about your day, pushing through any mistakes without stopping to self-correct. Just keep the flow going. And finally, organically learn and practice just 5 new phrases. Not 50, just 5 manageable building blocks each day. Now, there's this massive misconception that you have to wait until you feel completely ready to start speaking. People constantly think, oh, I'll speak when my vocabulary's broader, or I'll speak when my grammar is flawless. But it turns out, confidence doesn't come before speaking. Confidence comes from speaking. Stop waiting around. That confidence you're looking for is actually built on the other side of opening your mouth and making those inevitable mistakes. You speak, you mess up, your brain adjusts, and slowly, the confidence arrives.
Section 3. Your Speaking Challenge, the 5-minute action plan. It is time to put this into practice immediately.
Ultimately, the core takeaway from all this research is just this. Fluency is communication. It is not perfection. Your value in a conversation isn't tied to flawless grammar or a textbook accent. It's about connecting with another human being and sharing an idea. So here's my challenge for you. The exact moment this explainer ends, spend just 5 minutes speaking out loud about your day. No script, no translating in your head, and no stopping to fix mistakes. Just speak. The only question left is, how are you going to use your 20 minutes today to finally let your voice be heard?